I really got to get some uploading done today, though. I said that yesterday, but I took a long ass nap. It was nice. I took an old man nap. And Gene nodded his head. He's like, "Yep, I know what the old man nap is. It's when you just lay down for a few seconds and you wake up 4 hours later."
Nah, I don't do that. Keep moving.
All right, Karen, Lauren, good morning. So yesterday we were paying attention to our feet. How did that vibe for you? Was that possible?
Hello. Good morning.
Good morning.
It was good. I was able to remember more once I made the intention to do it. But I didn't remember all day, but I remembered more than I would have had this not been mentioned. Had we not agreed to put the attention on our feet. So it was helpful. And the light, it was very cloudy and rainy yesterday. So that didn't work out as well for me for some reason, but I'm okay with that. So I did feel more present.
Mm-hmm.
It brought me back to where I was, my senses. And as I was driving, I could feel my feet on the gas and the brake. And, I find it helpful. I think I'm going to do it again today.
Awesome. So Lauren said it took some practice. That makes sense. Especially if we're not used to doing it. So, I don't know how many years, like I wouldn't pay attention to my feet unless I stubbed my toe. I didn't see the reason, and I couldn't understand, like, is paying attention to my feet going to help me get this new jacket that I want, or these new shoes that I want, or the attention from this person that I want? No, okay, I don't care about that. But it does help take attention into the whole body. And I think that is emerging from the last 4 years is that the body can become the first background trick of attention, where we're maintaining that as a trick of attention as we're going throughout our day. A lot of people are reporting back to me that is looking like it's going to be the lowest hanging fruit in terms of maintaining attention throughout the day with very little forgetting, because that is possible. The more we do this practice, the more we make it probable. So if we're to look at this practice, I would say some people maybe need to enter into the philosophy right away. Philosophy? Yeah, I don't know. Definitions. So let's say, somebody was like passing along and, they're jumping from podcast to podcast and maybe they stumble across this group study. There's a good chance they're going to want to know a little bit word-wise about what we're doing. And a little bit of that is in the four corners or the four cornerstones of this practice. So talking a little bit about the nature of attention. I think that's fair. Let's give that a good chat because that's absolutely essential to this practice. And so we've done a good job of talking about what attention is. So yesterday, and Jenny's here, Shayna's here, I know both of you guys were paying attention to your feet yesterday. I sent Jenny a reminder. Ida sent Jenny a reminder. So we were reminding each other, and that's good. Shayna was commenting throughout the day at various times about the practice and sensing into her feet, so I know she was doing it. So that is taking what we talked about first and second, the first two cornerstones. Oh, wait a second. I can place my attention on my feet throughout the day. That's the nature of attention. I am it, but I'm just directing it. And that's all I'm doing. To what? A point of attention. And that's a trick of attention. So yesterday, we basically just experienced the first two cornerstones. Does that make sense? Any questions about that? So that's where our T practice begins. We get to feel it a little bit, talk about it a little bit, and that's okay. And also, if we're going to get talking about stuff, I don't mind talking about the two main principles that this whole practice is based around. That makes it a little bit different also than other practices out there. I was looking at mindfulness courses and stuff like that. Folks, what we're doing is not there. The act of allowing is not there. It's just not. They're still using words like force and control and, you know, and bless their hearts. They're probably wonderful courses and they can help many people. And that's okay. But what we're doing specifically is just not being represented very well. So, well, besides what we're doing, I haven't seen it represented at all. That doesn't mean it doesn't exist. It just means I haven't found it yet. And that's okay too. So the idea of the other two cornerstones, do you guys remember them? Ida, do you remember the other two cornerstones? So the first two is the nature of attention, and then we talk about tricks of attention, so we know what the heck we're doing with the nature of attention. But then what about these other two cornerstones? Two really important points of the T practice. Do you remember? If not, that's okay. I can just...
Yes, I can remember. It's just someone come in there and I didn't want them to be on. Anyway, the golden mean principle and the act of allowing.
Right. Yeah, both of those are right, Lauren and Ida. Act of non-resistance, I'm cool with. Act of allowing, I'm cool with. Those are all good ways, you know, reasonably consistent ways of describing the same thing. So I'm cool with both of those descriptions. So we have the golden mean principle, because this practice is based on balance. And I get it. Mike's balance is different than my balance. Maybe his balance, because he's lived in the East Coast, allows for more time outside in the cold. Well, my balance doesn't, and I can feel that. So when I'm outside in the cold, maybe I get uncomfortable way before Mike does because he's used to it. But then maybe we go into the desert where I've been dwelling, and he's like, oh my God, it's so hot. Like, I can't stand this. And I'm like, what are you talking about? It's fine. So he can feel that he's in an extreme, whereas for me, it doesn't feel like an extreme at all. So it is relative, but we can feel when we're in an extreme. And so that's a really important point. And a lot of this practice is learning to pay attention to ourselves as the moment is happening, so we can further identify and determine extremes. And also, we can identify what we're creating with our thinking. We'll be able to look at ourselves and say, oh, I've been talking myself out of doing the dishes. It's not just, you know, contrast or, you know, not in my alignment today. No, I'm talking myself out of it. So I can see that in the moment because of the practice. So does that make sense? So we have, and then the act of non-resistance is, this whole practice is not a bunch of things. It's not thou shalt not. We don't have, I mean, I do have traps of thinking, but that's just to help you. It's not, you know, it is what it is. But so the idea is that because we're engaged, then the resistance naturally is reduced because we're engaging. Resistance is not engaging. Whether we're resisting the present moment passively or aggressively, intentionally, passively or intentionally on purpose or not, you know, it's still resisting the present moment. And what I mean by that is the flashlight of our attention is turned in on something that we're just spinning about. And then now we're not flowing with the moment. We're pushing against it in a manner of speaking. Does that make sense? So that's the four corners of this practice. Jean, is that all right? Does that make sense? Those last two corners? The act of allowing.
Yeah, the four corners are fine. Allowing and the concept of forcing and changing direction and control and allowing, it seems to me that's a balance also. I mean, balance relates to that.
It does.
You can't be completely passive.
Right.
And you don't want to attempt to control all the events. But there's a balance in between. You can have preferences and move in a direction and for me, I'm not sure that is allowing. I don't allow for certain conditions. I'll be patient for a bit, but I prefer something else, so I move in another direction.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if you qualify that as allowing or as force, you know.
Well, ultimately, we don't have to trivialize it too much, because the moment you start to trivialize it, you are resisting the present moment. So, you know, the act of trivializing and trying to figure out whether this is force or isn't force is now definitely force, because now we're trying to control and understand and figure it out. So there may be things that you do that are still a little bit of residual habit. There may be things that you do that is because you want to get it done. So remember, sometimes our bodies will exist in an extreme. We'll go out into the cold and shovel the driveway. That's existing in an extreme. So there will be times that you can shift for whatever reason. And maybe it could have been a little bit more elegant. You'll learn that if you're paying attention. You know, you'll figure out, oh, I didn't need to go this far extreme. I could have done this extreme and everything still would have been fine. So you can kind of evaluate that or see that in a manner of speaking. You'll be able to feel that the more that you're paying attention to the moment. So, you know, there are times where you could be exercising a little bit of force, but so is standing up. So there's no real point in trying to evaluate what is force, what is non-resistance. But I know that I'm in the act of allowing a non-resistance when my thinking mind isn't, you know, I'm not turned in on the thinking mind. That's resistance. That's what I mean by force. So you maybe push the car out of the snow. You're tired of it being in the snow. You're like, I'm just gonna, and you just, that's not what I mean by force or not force. You see what I mean? Yeah, you used a lot of muscular, that could have been an act of flow, you know, where you had superhuman strength to push the car out of, that's not what I'm talking about. What I mean by force is, where was your mind? Were you sitting there trying to figure it out and thinking and the cognition on, and then out of anger you try, oh well, now let's back up a second. You know, you were fueled by anger and rage, and that's a different kind of energy, and I'm not sure that's the one that we want to tap into when we need to get things done. So force or allowing has to do with the thinking in this analogy, in the way that I'm using the words. Does that make sense? Whoops. There you go. Whoops. Okay. That does make sense. Is that groovy? Okay. What's that, Gene?
Oh, it's a different way of thinking about it. I was thinking more in the first example of force.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't realize that when you were speaking of force, you were talking about what thought processes,
mm-hmm.
as opposed to other than thought processes.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so choosing a different direction because it's appropriate and it feels right
Mm-hmm.
is not force.
It depends. Where's your cognition? You know, but if you're over here thinking about it, trying to figure it out, is this right? Is it wrong? Future projection. Boy, that's all kinds of force in trying to control. So
Okay.
I don't recommend that. You know, that's not really the act of allowing. The act of allowing is a mind that is not resisting the present moment. And maybe you are just, you're like, fuck it, I'm getting this car out of the snow, and you just pick that thing up and just push it out of the ditch, and you're like, rawr, and we're like, wow. I'm not going to say that's force, because I don't know where your psychology was. I don't know where your thinking mind was in that moment. Do you see what I mean? So that's what I mean by force and trying to control, is cognitively. This is we're talking about our mind. What are we doing with it? All right, so if that makes sense, we can kind of move on just a little bit, and I can kind of show you the evolution of this practice and what it is we're doing. So it's okay. I don't mind a little bit of philosophy and definitions. We've done that. And so we talk about the four corners. I'll put that in parentheses. That's all I really want to talk about in the beginning, though. Or we'll be talking about that shit all day and forever. So the four corners kind of moves into, you start to build your basic practice. And that's going to look like checking into tricks of attention. And that's kind of what we were told to do yesterday. So what we did with our 4 corners, so now we know, all right, we know what the fuck we're doing. We have attention. We are it. We can direct our attention. We did that by paying attention to our feet. When we're doing that, we are reducing resistance, and that is more of the act of allowing. And now we're finally starting to balance, because our whole life, pretty much, before we start this practice, we're not engaging. And that is a gross disproportional imbalance that has caused almost all of the human suffering that we're looking at today. It's because we stopped, for whatever reason, engaging the now moment. We started to just turn the light of attention in, and that can be beneficial to some extent when we're wanting to communicate to future generations. So we write a book. Fine. Let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater. But what humans have done is they have begun to identify with it. They have begun to cling to it. They have begun to attach to it. And that construct that we've created becomes a trap. It becomes a prison cell. So what we do is a little bit of Gestalt theory here in the beginning of this practice, because we talk about what attention is and then we do it. And then, so now we're going throughout the day and we're like, oh shit, I can pay attention, but I do forget a lot. Now we're starting to, this practice is starting to make sense. Eventually we'll remember more, and then eventually we'll remember all the time, and then eventually we'll see our own cognition and our own output, and we'll have the opportunity to move things. See, so let's say, Gene, this is a perfect example. Let's say that I'm paying attention to myself and I'm about to get that 3rd piece of cake. So it's not forced to say, no, this piece of cake isn't serving me. I'm going to keep on moving. I'm going to go get some water and, wash the other 2 pieces down. It's all good. So that wasn't necessarily forced. It just depends on the cognition and what we were doing with it. In that example, it was a little bit of the rule of 3 and breathing and a little bit of talking, which is the affirmation. You're activating that voice of power, and now you were able to redirect to something different. And I wouldn't say that that's trying to control. Trying to control would be maybe like telling yourself that, oh, you're going to get fat, or don't eat this, just push it away. You don't need this. This is your diet. It starts tomorrow. And, all these different things. And now we're spinning the wheels of cognition, and that's creating emotion and energy. And that's just a very tangled web. And that's not allowing. That's exercising cognitive force that will equal physical force, trying to control everything around us. So that's a good example of that. So far in this practice, we get a little bit of background. And so now we do get to learn what the nature of attention is by doing it here in the beginning, by building basic tricks of attention. And that's probably where I'll start talking about building your toolbox. Check into the present moment and do a little bit of your toolbox. That could look like fox walking. We'll talk more about 4 modes practice, these transitions that we're doing. So we're going to start talking about, and leaving note cards, using note cards, objects of power, all the different tricks of attention that we could talk about. That's what the basic alignment is all about. So does that make sense? We get a little bit of background. We talk about what we're doing a little bit, not too much though, because we don't want to get too into the philosophy of it. A little bit of philosophy is fine, because we need to know what the hell are we doing and why are we doing it. Although I still stay away from virtue selling. So I'm still waiting for the right way to talk about the virtues of tea without it sounding like I'm trying to sell somebody inner peace, because that ain't it. That's not where I'm going with this. So does that make sense so far, what we've been doing? And I'll go back to the whiteboard, and we can, are there any questions about what we've done so far? So we talked about a little bit of philosophy. That would be the 4 corners. We learned a little bit about tricks of attention yesterday. We proved that we could do it. We saw that we can pay attention to our feet. Maybe we're not sold on doing it all the time just yet. Maybe that doesn't seem reasonable, but that's okay. But at least we see that we can do it. Like we can, so that's the asset. So if we do these 2 things here, and what we did yesterday, we proved that we can actively, selectively choose our point of attention. And that's the asset theory. So we just proved it yesterday because you actively, selectively chose, and you're not going to convince me that that was predetermined, that what you were doing yesterday with your feet was an act of predetermination and you were going to do that no matter what, and you had no choice. So I'm not down with that. So with that excluded, though, you guys did it yourself yesterday. By paying attention to your feet, you were starting to build your toolbox, and now we're really cooking. That's the basis of this practice. And that's what basic alignment would be all about. So the rest of the basic alignment is really just going to be more points of attention. What can we do with our points of attention? Does that make sense?
I suppose it's individual that atrophy of awareness can be stronger in some people than others. Would you? Well, you know, you'll never know that.
I'll never know that. Yeah. So I don't see a lot of reason to
discuss it. Okay.
Well, because I wouldn't think about that either, really.
Yeah. No. Well, I was just thinking as you were talking there that atrophy of awareness, I wasn't even aware of it, that there was such a thing.
Yeah. No, me either until I started doing it. Yeah.
So I mean, to somebody new coming into that, that's a very strong point.
Mm-hmm.
To learn about that what you've been doing up till now, if you hadn't been aware of your own thinking, if you hadn't been aware that you could control it, you could change it, you could put space in it.
You know, so I'll put another arrow because you remind me. Let's do this. I think this would be a good whiteboard maybe for me to screenshot and post later. So I'm going to go over here with it. My little chat board. So I think maybe down here, Ida, I would put we have the opportunity to see and so we have the opportunity to see the nature of thinking and attention, because maybe up to this point that person has identified with their thought their whole life. That's possible. That the person that is coming to the first study and is learning about tea, they didn't know that they weren't there thinking. They didn't read Eckhart Tolle. They haven't done some of the back work that you guys have. So that's another good point. You guys just saw that yesterday. You just saw by paying attention to your feet that has nothing to do with thought necessarily. Sometimes our thought can remind us, and now we're using our thought to help point to the second ring of power, and that's fine. But you guys saw yesterday, you're not just your thoughts. There's something else. We're also this attention, and if that was your first time discovering that, it can be like, holy smokes. Like, I'm not just my thinking mind. Like, there's more to my human experience. So that could be pretty profound. Does that make sense? That's easy.
I was certainly one of those people who thought I was a deep thinker, read a lot of books, and hadn't made that leap.
Most deep thinkers don't. Most deep thinkers just stay deep thinkers. I mean, I don't have any reason to believe necessarily that just thinking all the time ever leads to anything other than thinking all the time. Which is fine if that's what you're into. But does that make sense? So what we're talking about with the, building the base of this practice and how this practice would look in the beginning, and then we start to go in. Yes.
What's big for me is the realization that I'm responsible for my own mind. Because thinking, I always used to think my mind would just think. I had no control over what I was thinking. I could, whatever comes into my mind, I just came, so you think that you can't direct your thoughts, or you can't change what you're doing, change the way you're thinking, or reduce the amount of thinking you have. But now that I know I'm responsible for all this, it's freeing in a way, because then that means I don't have to think all this crap all the time, you know? That's
Yeah.
just, yeah.
No, that makes perfect sense to me. Yeah. So that could be a discovery that we could have just made based on our exercise that we did yesterday. Paying attention to our feet. And then like Karen said, it's like, holy shit, like I could actually, and maybe we do use the word control in the beginning, and I wouldn't correct somebody. So if Gene is like, oh, I can control my thoughts, I'm gonna be like, well, Gene, let's talk about the nature of control for the next 45 minutes. No, it's fine. So it's like, wow, we can do this. Like we can direct our mind, we can direct our attention. When we get into when we go from basic alignment to counterbalance, we really get into that. That's when we really start taking responsibility. And then things get really groovy then at that point. And that's actually where I'm going next with those arrows. So we built a little bit of a foundation. I'm fast forwarding a little bit too, by the way. I'm giving like a grand overview of what we're doing here. So, so let's fast forward a little bit, and let's say we've been doing months now of what we did yesterday, paying attention to your feet, and now you're paying attention to your hands, and whenever you're touching something, you're sensing into it, and whenever you look out the window, you're looking at the geometry of it. I don't know, whatever your tricks of attention are. Maybe you have objects of power now, and you're maintaining more presence. All right. So now we start to move on to the next aspect of T, and the counterbalance phase is where we really start to embody it. So, one of the primary things that we would start to talk about is the rule of three and the 3-strike rule. Well, I'm just going to call it the rule of three, because as Gene pointed out, we don't need 3 strikes. All we need is 1 strike, and then that's enough to redirect. So this is the beginning of CRT, cognitive redirectional therapy. This is where we start to look at our own cognition, and we can just see and feel that this cognition is not benefiting us. And we're not necessarily going to redirect to positive thinking or, that type of thinking. We're going to start to do what I call activating the voice of power. And that is definitely one of the most important things that I can offer in terms of the act of allowing is the voice of power. We start developing this voice. And the voice of power starts out as a little bit of, we start looking at things a different way. We start talking to ourselves a different way. And then the voice of power is a result of that non-resistance, infinite and finite. And then before you know it, words are occurring, but they're words you've never thought before, never said before, never heard before. And it takes on a totally new complexion. And it's also a lot less. It's not spinning nonstop. It'll occur, and then it will disappear into the ether. And that's why I say write it down, so that you can let it disappear into the ether. If that's how you let go of things, it can help. I've written it down. I'm not going to forget it. I don't need to write it down anymore. I've actually gone away from that, because I have found that if it's a really good idea, it does reoccur. If it wasn't a very good idea, then it typically just disappears into the ether and doesn't come back. But if it's a really good idea, typically I do remember. And if I don't, I don't know. I don't know what I don't remember. That's a funny thing about the mind. So what we're doing in the counterbalance phase is we start to activate the voice of power, and that is going to start to address something very, very important. And I call it leaking power. We're going to start to address leaking power by using the voice of power and the rule of three. And this is the cognitive redirectional therapy. And now we're getting into counterbalance phase. Does that make sense? Is this do you kind of see where the T path is kind of headed with this? Can I answer questions? Yes, Ida.
No, I was just going to say yes. It does make sense.
anyone else, do you have questions about what this is so far? So we've talked about the voice of power. The first book that I'm writing is about the voice of power. So we're just getting straight into, you know, the redirectional aspect of leaking power, redirecting that type of cognition. So I would not say that this is positive anything. I don't really want to use the word positive. I would like to use the word functional. It is more functional thought that will start to occur, and that's okay. In fact, it's probably desirable. We live in a world that is a lot of dysfunctional thought, so let's balance that out by putting a little functional thought into the ether. That's fine. Does that all make sense though? So now what we're doing with the rule of three is, because we're doing our tricks of attention. So Gene, we're going to use Gene as our example. So now Gene has been practicing for like a year now, and he's been paying attention to his feet and his body and light sources and rooms and, you know, different smells, and he'll have ideas come up about how to fix things and create things, and he's not declaring war on that. He has a little journal of, you know, aha ideas and kind of meh ideas and holy shit ideas. So he's categorizing them and just doing his thing, and that's fine. And so now we're really working this practice, and now we're into what I call sensory attention training. We're paying attention to our senses all of the time. And now we have this other thing that I call cognitive attention. We're aware of our own cognition. So now, because Gene is practicing his mindfulness and he's embodying it more throughout the day, he now has the opportunity to see thoughts as they happen, to see behavior as it happens. And now we start to talk about what to do with that. And that's called redirection. And the redirection isn't to positive thinking. We're not trying to create new habits. We're not reprogramming, whatever that is, our neural networks and synaptic connections. We're going back to paying attention to the world around us. So when Gene sees that his cognition is starting to get repetitive, whoa, I'm going to use 3 points of attention now, 3 tricks of attention to bring it on back. And one of those tricks of attention will involve words. That's important. And then when he's done with his rule of 3, he'll try to go back to a point of attention. So it's rule of 3, back to a point of attention, at least 1 to 2 degrees. So Gene is paying attention to himself because he's doing his tricks of attention, and then he forgets a little bit because shit starts to happen around him. But he's accumulated some practice, so he sees it much quicker that, whoa, shit's starting to get, you know, I'm getting very far away from the moment now. Let me bring it back. And then he's going to use words. That's 1 point. Here I am. I am present, and I'm going to be the light in this darkness right now that's occurring. And then he puts attention on his body, his breath, and then he's using the words that redirects it back to the present moment. Not necessarily positive thinking, although if that works for a little while, he can. I'm not going to tell him not to do that. But when he's getting punched in the face, everything is working out for me may not feel good. It may not feel true. He's getting punched in the face right now. You know, right now, maybe if you were in the hospital and you were experiencing pain, telling yourself certain affirmations that you always tell yourself, maybe it's not as applicable right now. So that's why it's not just positive thinking. It's tell yourself true things, principles, you know. Everything is changing. This is changing too. That's universal principle, man. I mean, I can't argue with that one bit. But that can help you accept that how you feel now is not how you will feel later. Let's just keep it going. Just keep it going. That type of thing. So now we're getting into cognitive redirectional therapy, and we're getting into cognitive attention training, to where we're aware of ourselves in space and time and what's occurring in our output and our behavior and our emotions. And we're able to redirect thought that is repetitive, thought that is habitual, the same old thought. Every time somebody comes in with a beard, Gene thinks, oh, I fucking hate people with beards, man. I can't trust bearded. Wait a second. I don't need, wait. Like that's a habitual thought. And then so he's going back to his tricks of attention or thoughts that aren't making him feel well. I have done this so that we don't have to try to evaluate thought, because the act of evaluating thought. So is the rule of three evaluating thought? Yes, but it's focused so that you don't have to try to compartmentalize and categorize, and because then before you know it, you're like, maybe this thought that I've been thinking is the thought that I should be thinking about these other thoughts that I've been thinking about what I should do. And now you're just thinking about whether you should be thinking, which is still thinking, and that's an act of resistance. You're resisting the present moment. You're not moving with it, flowing with it, vibing with it. Does that make sense? And that is cognitive redirection therapy. Is this practice starting to, I'm hoping to give like this overarching view of T and what we're doing here. And that's the only 3 points that I recommend redirecting in the beginning. Repetitive, habitual, not making you feel well. We'll build on that, but we never replace it. I don't replace practice. That's one of the things. So like if I start offering movement, it's not movement that you'll level up from someday. It's movement that you can do for the rest of your life. And so I only have so much of that movement to offer, but it's movement that you can do every single day for the rest of your life. It's not movement that you'll level up from, or that you're just, doing this so that you can do this, so that you can do this, so that. I don't really get into that. Can I do this for the rest of my life until I'm 110? If yes, fine. That's what I want to do. I want to do that now so I can do that later. Does that make sense? Any questions about what this practice is so far with this chart that I'm creating here, to kind of give you an overarching view of what's going on here with T? I would also put over here somewhere that we've also gotten into cognitive attention training, CAT. CAT is self-awareness. You are awareness. Yeah. So this is cognitive. You're cognizant of what's occurring right now in your own mind, in your own body. Does this make sense? All right. So a person can stop at any point in the T practice, and if they continue to do it, I think that they'll benefit. I really do. So if somebody stops at the counterbalance and they're like, and we've had people do that actually. And so this is a shout out to all the folks who just aren't able to come to the group study, but they're still finding benefit in it. I see it, sometimes I see it in their language now. I see it in the posts that they make. I can see that their language, is T-esque, and I'm good with that. But I can see, where T is still working for those who kind of stopped in the counterbalance. Fine. I really think that even basic alignment could be hugely beneficial to somebody. It can help reduce stress, and reducing stress can be great physically, psychologically, energetically. So it's all good. If somebody just embraced a portion of this practice, I still think it's going to benefit them. Bottom line, paying attention is always an act of allowing. It's always going to be beneficial, and it will help. We can't do too much paying attention to the now moment. That's impossible. There's no such thing as imbalance and balance there, because that's the seat of experience. So no, there's no doing that too much. We can think and pay attention to the moment, so we don't have to sacrifice one for the other. That's another groovy aspect of this practice. All right, so let's just say though that somebody doesn't want to stop there. They want to go to the next stage of T, which is warrior training. So now what warrior training fundamentally addresses I'll put this here. So the accumulation and cultivation of personal power and dissolving the habit of control, of attempting to control. Oh man, let me see if I can change this. Oh no, that's not what I wanted to do. Okay, so there we go. I want a smaller arrow. Okay. All right, so now we're on to warrior training, and this is accumulation, cultivation of personal power, and this is full-on embodiment training. That's really what we really start to get into with warrior training. Warrior training is full embodiment. And the good news is you can honestly learn like the gist of warrior training in 1 hour. Really, I could break down warrior training in that amount of time. Doing it took 2 years of practice together. So we did warrior training for 2 years together, and we were just doing one thing, or the same thing the whole time. So to accumulate personal power, I have devised this little equation, and it's P1, that's it, hold on. We're gonna R divided by P1 plus a smooth breath multiplied by P2 and plus focus on what you're doing equal flow, more flow. Right? So this is, I have my body, that's a P1. My whole body could be, or you could pick a point in your body, and that's okay too. Oh, I meant to hit enter. Only I could see that, I forgot. So we have P1 plus a smooth breath times, that should say P2. Dang it, I messed it up. So P2 plus the focus on whatever we're doing. You're about to go do the dishes, try this equation. Internal point of attention plus a smooth breath, external point of attention plus whatever I'm doing. Now, okay, paying attention to your feet, listening to me, painting. Ida, that should feel like just do energy. That should feel like non-resistant action.
Yeah, and looking down towards the sea, and it's raining, so there's noise on the window. It's all
Perfect.
good.
Well, hey, that's perfect. So does that equation kind of make sense? Internal point of attention plus an external point of attention, but we're going to add smooth breath plus paying attention to what we're doing, because this is intention and will, just do energy, personal power. We'll start to accumulate and cultivate this at this stage in the practice. Easy. What's hard is remembering the traps of thinking, because for years we've been forgetting these. I don't know if Jerry has her notes, but in the previous stage of training, we just had repetitive, habitual, and not making us feel well. Now we'll start to build on some other traps of thinking that we will redirect using the rule of 3. Comparing and contrasting, indulging the thought of psychological time, imaginary scenarios, I've added that one. What are some others? So we have trying to figure it out.
Expectations.
Thinking about wants and expectations, thinking about desires. It's easier for me to do one tool at a time. That's fair, Lauren. Yeah. And that
kind of falls, not changing the subject, but that kind of falls into my question yesterday about Abraham, finding that better feeling thought, envisioning what you want. I've been hearing that a lot. I have somebody who's really knee deep in it, close to me, and so I'm kind of getting that sense. We don't have to go there. But you just said thinking about desires. And I think in that practice, thinking about your desires is what's creating it. Thoughts create things. So I'm changing the subject.
Yeah, but it's fine. But ultimately, we're also talking about perpetuating imbalances. So notice that person that you're talking about, they'll be doing that. They'll always be thinking about thoughts to things because they're just thinking about it all the time. So the creation is the thought, not necessarily what they want. So the idea here is that we are subject to the golden mean principle. Do you remember that? That's one of the four corners. I visualize an enlightened society, Jerry. I do it once a day, and then I don't do it again for the rest of the day. Because I don't want to stay there. I don't want to exist there. Does that make sense?
It does. I apologize. Would you mind just briefly repeating that? I was answering Rose.
Yeah.
Got pulled off.
Okay, so we're working with a principle, and it's called the golden mean. So I'm not rejecting visualization. Do you see what I mean? I visualize every morning for about 30 seconds. And that's
Yes,
good enough.
I did hear that. You do it, but
Right.
You're not spending a day in it.
No.
Yes.
Right. And so every now and then, Jerry, I will use thoughts to redirect my thoughts back to the step right in front of me. This should start to sound like Abraham Hicks. So now I'll use thoughts that feel good to direct me back to the direction but I don't stay there. I don't exist in those thoughts. I don't spend all of my time doing it, because if I do, now I'm just thinking about shit all the time. And you can sit there and think about a Heisman Trophy all you want to. It ain't gonna get you a Heisman Trophy. You got to do something for that. That requires a step right in front of you. But the thought could relax your mind so that you can focus on the step right in front of you with just due energy. And I think people really would benefit if they read Abraham Hicks, but they read the Law of Attraction and skip forward to the chapter on deliberateness, the deliberate nature of the Law of Attraction. The Law of Attraction requires deliberate attention, and Abraham Hicks has said it through and through. So I quote Abraham Hicks, ask and it is given. All thoughts take us away from source. So if all thoughts are taking away from source, then it's not just thinking that will help us manifest our desire. That's what people are doing already, is thinking all of the fucking time. So when someone tells you to just think about your desire, they're like, oh, I can do that. And then they end up in the groups for the next 10 years, paying people ungodly amounts of money trying to figure it out.
So Abraham said that. All thoughts take us away from source. Abraham.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that. Oh, awesome.
So I was thinking while you were saying that, if you visualize your in the mornings, what is it you call it? An enlightened society.
That's just how I don't ever think that. But that's
but say you're doing that in the morning for 30 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
Well, then if you carried on thinking about that all day, that's just interrupting the
That's a form of resistance.
There's the bit that you leave it, and the bit that you do it for 30 seconds and then you forget all about it until the next time you do it. That's the bit in between, is the allowing bit, is it not?
It is. Yeah. So the principle here is balance. And that's why in this practice, you'll find yourself manifesting and creating far faster than in some of these other manifestation programs. You may be doing it already. To what degree can you indulge in the feeling of being with someone new? Lauren, do you mean like relationships? Like romantic relationships? Oh, I'm actually, I have this thing that I call the spark, the fire, and the flame, and I'm kind of developing that, and I think that is something that could be beneficial to people in terms of relationships. But the spark of newness is a spark, and it doesn't stay. A spark doesn't stay. If you want it to become a flame, there's something you have to do. You have to care for it, in a manner of speaking. You have to give it something that it can go from just that spark of newness to the flame of something more. So let's say Gene sees the mountains for the first time. That's the spark of new. He's going to be moved. He's going to be enamored. Maybe for a week or two, 3 weeks, a year, 2 years, I don't know. Just depends on Gene's mind. But let's say that he's not practicing and he's just, he takes the same mind that he had in New York and he takes it to the mountains, and he finds himself after a couple years now, he's creating all of the same situations that he left his previous area for. The spark of newness is gone, and he didn't take the time to cultivate that into a flame and then into a fire. So the way that I'm describing this is that the spark is actually quite easy. I mean, he sees the new river, he's enamored by the new river. You see a new lover and you're enamored by the new lover, and it's like, ooh, this is new and fancy. And some people, Lauren, get attached to that. I can say that I was one of them. I would get attached to that spark, and it's like, ooh, new, fancy, and I can't wait to have. And then because we're not really cultivating anything, there's no honest exchange, then it just ends up indulging in an extreme. And then before you know it, it's just psychological suffering. And then we're getting into this pattern of chasing the spark, and then we have no satisfying relationship with the mountains because we're
It's
too
just a
busy.
new shiny object.
That's all it is.
Well, I'm going to take Lauren's example, and I'm not saying this is how she meant it, but we were talking about visualization. And you said, yeah, I do that in the morning for a few minutes and then I move on. I'm not hanging in it all day.
Right.
So maybe, she's just maybe visualizing in the morning for a few minutes about a desire for a new relationship, someone in her life. I mean, can't that be a couple minutes a day in the morning?
Well, I'm not gonna. So here's also a thing, Jerry.
We do it.
Yeah. So here's the thing: is I'm not gonna judge. That's not my place. Lauren hasn't asked me to do that, and I'm not gonna be able to follow her around. But if Lauren says something and she's explaining how this is in balance, then I think she's attempting to observe principle, and I'm not Lauren's judge for that. But if Lauren says, I'm imagining, these good feeling thoughts for a little bit throughout the day, and it feels imbalanced, then yeah, I'm not going to judge her. It sounds like we're observing the principle of balance. So yeah, I would see. I'm not here to tell you that there's something wrong with that. Does that make sense, Jerry? So to answer your question, that could be perfectly in line and in principle. I see nothing.
Yeah, no, and that's why I was asking. I was just going by her words when she said, again, I'm just using her example. I'm not trying to speak for her, but when she said, to what degree can you indulge?
You'd have to go by the feeling. Yeah, you'd go by the feeling and whether you can feel, is it pulling you away from your practice? If I was going to start to put this in hydrostasy terms, Jerry, when you no longer feel peace, when you don't feel peace, it's because we're adding resistance. We're adding dirt to the water and it's turning into mud. So we don't feel peace anymore. When you don't feel peace, you are in an extreme, and it's time to check ourselves before we wreck ourselves. So if you find that these thoughts, Lauren, are taking you away from your practice, if you find that these thoughts are starting to create like this longing and this anxiety, because it's a future. And so anxiety is what will occur from future thoughts. And typically we're violating warrior training principle the more we do that, because now we're existing in and notice, Jerry, how when we start to violate principle, these things are happening simultaneously. We're violating 5 or 6 at the same time, because now we're trying to figure it out. When? In an imaginary future. How? By comparing and contrasting, labeling and judging. And now, before you know it, we have violated the principle of balance. We're existing in an extreme, and we're trying to control, and we're surfing the internet asking people about, all of these different things, and we're a leaf at the mercy of the wind. Remember, this is the law of attraction. I'm giving the law of attraction right now. I'm just doing it in a way that we could actually do it, rather than just think about it. If I sit here and start to name the things that through personal power I have manifested in air quotes, like it's going to be a long group study. So manifestation is occurring. So I am creating a web that I like, that I want to exist in. Does that make sense, Jerry? Does that help answer those questions, Lauren? I think the hydrostasy circle really does help visualize it. The more it starts to become resistance, the more we're outside of our hydrostasy circle. And before you know it, the mind is just a leaf at the mercy of the wind, and every now and then we're just thinking about what we want. We're imagining what we want. Everything is about us. And then before you know it, Jerry, we're just indulging self-importance all the time. Me, I.
Yeah, I was going to say that earlier, that, yeah, self, dissolving self.
And seer's training is the next stage. And if you don't want to do seer's training, I get it. I totally understand. That's really taking embodiment to the next level. I mean, we're really doing it when we go to seer's training. And I can start to explain that now if we don't have more questions, because it's super simple. The warrior training is super simple, but just like everything else, we got to do it. And that's not always so super simple. So somewhere around this time, though, I would also add some auxiliary training, maybe something designed around, I'm going to try to move my board over here a little bit. And then I probably would offer a little bit of, at this point, we could do a little auxiliary training on how to navigate the island of the practical, the 4 voices. I will be talking more about, and this will actually coincide with the law of attraction, but directing personal power. That is manifestation, and doing it responsibly. And by responsibly, I mean without resistance. If you accumulate personal power and you introduce resistance, you will find yourself manifesting some bullshit. It may be shiny and new at first, and then you look back at the next 10 years and you're like, well, fuck, this isn't what I wanted at all.
Yeah. I have fun with the visualizations, and then sometimes they warp into how. And when I get to the how, that's when I start to try to control how it happens. And then that's when the resistance come up. So that, yeah, the visualizations are fine. They make me feel good. But when I go into the how am I going to make it happen? That's when the resistance pops up for me.
Bingo.
And if there's longing or lack, a feeling of you haven't got the thing that you're longing for, that's where the resistance is too.
Mm-hmm. Well, I would say that feeling of lack and longing is a result of existing in the extreme of thinking about it too much or visualizing it too much.
The feeling of unknown comes into me for how I feel, and then like the unknown scares me to death. Yeah.
And that's the mind. So the mind that's what it does. It doesn't, unknown is like sketchy because it wants to make the unknown known.
Yeah, because I want to control it, and I want to, make it perfect and pretty, and be perfect, and like it's going to be ultimately, the greatest thing in the world. But I want to control how that works, and that's unknown to me, and that's where the resistance and the fear comes in. So yeah, the visualizations are great, but when you start to go into how and trying to control that how, that's when they get a little not good.
That's where the magic is, and leaving that be, the allowing bit. I find if that's the bit where there's excitement, because you don't know how, and you could never imagine how, because the possibilities are infinite and how it comes about, and then you can recognize it. The first sign of it that comes along, you can kind of see it, and you couldn't have imagined how it was going to come about. That's my experience of it.
Yeah, and that's the point of having a principle-based technique practice. We're going to recognize that. We're going to recognize, pretty quickly that our visualization has gotten into control, expectation. We're starting, we catch it and we redirect. But like Erna says, it's okay. And like Shana just said it too, it's being aware of what our practice is and when we're veering off.
And what Ida described, it sounded like there was an allowing, like she got excited about the unknown, but sometimes that doesn't always happen like that from my experience. Like sometimes, yeah, the unknown is great depending on what it is. So yeah, from what Ida described, yes, I can understand what she's saying. Like sometimes you get an excitement because you don't know what's going to happen, and that's the exciting part of doing it. While other times it's kind of like, yeah, when it comes to like your life situations and making decisions, like, that can affect a lot of different things, it becomes kind of scary. That's where you have to kind of go back to your practice and allow, what's the first step in front of you. You got to focus on that, not the outcome of what's going to happen, because sometimes that comes in, a lot of controlling comes into that.
That tendency to control for me is a big deal too. I don't know, it's just, you always want things the way you want them. And then giving that up and saying whatever can happen, it's difficult sometimes.
I definitely agree, especially for me in certain areas of my life, especially like with finances and things like that. That's an area that is really a challenge for me personally, is I want to control every aspect. I guess it's the accountant mind of me. Like I like to play with the numbers, but I also like to manipulate and control how the outcomes come. So there's a lot of trust, as Jerry has. You have to go back to trust that things are going to work out, no matter what.
This is science, man. It's science. It's got no choice but to work. Just we got to do the practice.
Yeah, and I you notice I don't use the word trust. I don't use the word trust, and I don't really use the word faith. Those things can get a little bit sticky.
Well, then let's change it to knowing. There's just a knowing.
You can see it. You can feel it.
Yeah, you just know. Yeah, if we are doing this practice, and I'm just using our group right now, because most of us, we've been here long enough, we understand the principles of the practice, whether it's how much we're remembering throughout the day. But when you understand the principles, there's just a knowing that I sense where I'm going right now. I can tell I'm trying to control my expectations. Whoa, slow it down, back to the practice. And yeah, I would say trust. You just got to trust that it's working. It's working. Just let it work. Stand back, get out of your way.
So I'm going to redirect this away from the word trust. And one of the ways that I'm going to do that is, so we have the 4 factors of embodiment. What is the first factor? Jerry, this is for you. What's the first factor of embodiment?
I like the question game. First factor of embodiment. My mind isn't there. Sorry.
I'm going to get you started. The unbending.
Oh, the unbending desire for change.
No, change is always happening.
The unbending desire to feel better.
Okay, we'll go with that. The unbending desire to feel better. I get a little bit more specific because all feel better will come from peace. The unbending desire to feel peace. And number 2, identifying and understanding where not peace comes from. And that's thought, that's thinking, and that's the resistance. And so we have peace and not peace. Not peace is a mind that's at war with itself, that's fighting the present moment, resisting the present moment, bored or otherwise at odds with the present moment. That is resistance. A mind that is bored or otherwise at odds with the present moment, resisting it, passively or intentionally. So I don't need trust because I can feel peace. I don't need faith because I can feel peace. I don't need to believe what Jean is telling me or what Shayna is telling me because I can feel peace. So if that is always my basis, you know what? And I think that's what I'm going to focus on. So when I move forward and I offer this as a school and as a teaching and yada yada, what are we doing? For what? Like, what's the focus here? Peace, inner peace. Inner peace is not a hustle. So and I'd like to get into that at some point, but if we have the unbending desire to feel peace, this practice gets us there quickly, sometimes, less quickly other times, depending on the momentum that we've been creating. But this practice is fundamentally designed around something that you can feel the moment you do it. The moment you do your rule of three, you feel more peace. The moment you do who did their tricks of attention yesterday? Who put their attention on their feet yesterday? Did you feel more peace than some of those days where you didn't do it at all? Did you feel it yesterday? I felt it. I did. I felt even more peace than maybe what I would have if I didn't do anything at all. Jerry, did you do your practice yesterday? Did you focus on your feet?
Yes, feet is yes, but I noticed that you guys, I must have missed that in the class that it was a group thing. But yes, I was doing my practice yesterday, in and out.
Hold on. Hold on. Can you hear me now? Sorry,
Yeah.
Okay.
I found, I know I've done this before, and I know that you've changed things, but I got my notes out for the 4 factors of embodiment, and I just wanted to read a couple of them.
Okay.
As this is just, taking notes when you first did it, but I know you've been changing them. Number 1, the unbending desire to change, in parentheses, peace, faith that I can. Number 2, have identified that thinking is the root cause. 3, taking responsibility for our thoughts, no cherry picking. 4, full accountability. 5, intuitive living.
Right. So so those might have been original notes. You know how that goes. Let's drop number 5, intuitive living. That sounds confusing as shit. So I like it because that's what Ida was talking about when we're in the act of allowing and our life is finding flow, perpetual flow. So intuitive living is the hydrostasy effect.
Yeah, number 5 is just speaking for myself. I don't know why you take that off, because I'm experiencing that every day. Every day.
Well, just because it can get confusing to talk about, because now we got to talk about what is intuition and the 4 factors of embodiment is kind of a why are we doing this? So we can have the 5th as hidden, and intuitive living I'm going to put as hydrostasy. That's hydrostasy. Hydrostasy is staying inside of your hydrostasy circle. The 6th sense, Lauren, there's lots of things that we could put as number 6, but proprioception in psychology is being considered the 6th sense, our body in space and time. But intuition, that could be one of that 7th or 6th or whatever. It doesn't matter what order we put it in, but yeah, intuition can also, when our body is the instrument of perception, that's hydrostasy though. So I do get into that. So 3 and 4 are the same to you. So holding the responsibility, I am now going to take responsibility. Cherry picking is actually the accountability. No, cherry picking is accountability. So if you're willing to take the responsibility, you have to hold yourself accountable for your practice. So accountability and responsibility go hand in hand, but sometimes, we're not holding ourselves accountable for the responsibility. So those two, I do think they go hand in hand, but I've separated them just so that we can work with them a little better. Just like presence and mindfulness, you know, you can't have mindfulness without presence. So those do go hand in hand, but you can't have presence without mindfulness.
Yeah, I guess I put them together. Accountability and responsibility, they're the same to me.
I can see that, yeah. So first is the unbending desire to feel peace. And that's why in this practice, you don't need a promise. You don't need faith. You don't need to trust. You don't need to really any of that, because you can experience peace when you do the practice. And then that becomes anything that we need, you know, to help convince us to continue to do it, is we feel peace when we do it. So that feeling becomes the motivational factor. Does that make sense? The unbending desire to feel peace. That's a creation. That's manifesting. And everything will flow from that. That's the act of allowing. Letting everything just flow from that. Does that make sense? That's fine, right? Okay. Now we're going to fast forward a little bit. So we did basic alignment a long time ago. And we've been doing the counterbalance, and we've been doing that, and we've been doing warrior training for a couple years. And now we're starting to find a background trick of attention. Is that okay? We're starting to pay attention to our feet all of the time, or our body all of the time. And now we get into these I don't know what I'm going to call them. Maybe I'll call it the three primary virtues. I don't know. But the three pillars hold up these three things. One, the act of allowing. And now we're getting into seers training. Okay, so now seers training, at this point, we are feeling peace. And we can feel that. So all these other things that come from peace, happiness, vibrancy, joy, excitement, connection, flow, in the tennis game, or when the kids come over, or when the sun is shining, and when we're feeling appreciation, these are the virtues of tea, right? And now we can start to embrace those virtues. This does not involve thought. This isn't, I originally called these the three virtues of tea. Yeah. And it is the three primary virtues of tea. So I could still call it that. So the three virtues, it's all alignment. We are in alignment. We are in alignment to what? The flow of the moment happening now. We're synced up with it. Flow is being really synced up with the moment. Gene, when you're in flow and you're just beasting your tennis game, you're just doing awesome. Isn't a good way to describe that? You are in unison with the moment happening now.
Yeah, that's a good way to describe it, right? Yeah, there's no separation. We're all, I'm a part of what's happening. I'm just a part of it. And I don't steer it. I don't control it. I'm just involved in it. I react, and I'm part of the play.
Yeah, how about synchronized with it? Yeah, so we feel like we're in synchronization with the moment, alignment. You're in alignment with the moment happening now. Synchronization, union, yoga. You know, we start to use these words. Tai Chi, the movement of movement. We're flowing with that movement, the Tao, the way that the universe, it's all happening. All of these things that we've been talking about and all of these ancient philosophies, when we're in seers training, is occurring. And we start to use the light of our attention to focus on that. We start to use the light of our attention to focus on the 1970s brown feeling. We start to focus on the feeling of peace. I say 1970s brown because that's just one of those feelings that it's like, I can't, you know, hitting the door in grade school for summer vacation, and the warm air hits you and the freedom hits you, air quotes, freedom hits you. Those types of feelings, you know, we can start to find that all the time throughout the day, and we can focus on it, highlight it, engage it, and it gets more vibrant in our experience, more pronounced in our experience. And now we're interacting with feeling. Whoa, 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 wait a second. What did Abraham Hicks say to do in manifesting? Isn't the whole practice, everything that Abraham Hicks is talking about is feeling based? Well, looky there. Now we've just flash forwarded, and now we're able to find the feeling, focus on the feeling, create more feeling, and all the stuff around it is just a byproduct of finding the feeling. But we find the feeling first and manifest from there. Does that make sense? Oh gosh, there is no resistance at this point. That's what seer's training is. Seer, when you are the seer, you are a mind that is not in resistance. You are seeing the moment. That often leads to new perspective. And sometimes that perspective will emerge as the voice of power. So maybe Gene is doing something, and then he sees this perspective of, you know, right now he is engaging the grandkids, and he's doing that, and that is the most important thing to him. And this perspective of, there is nothing more important than what I'm doing right now with these grandkids. Nothing. That's a type of perspective, a type of realization, a type of seeing, and it's felt. Now, true, he may have cognitively verbalized that, and I'll call that the voice of power. So does this make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. Totally. Yeah. Yeah, because I was gonna put, I couldn't remember exactly what you said, but makes total sense to me, because when you're focusing on what's happening right now and not going out into the future and trying to control an expectation in the future that you have no idea how it's going to turn out, you are more at peace. You're more connected with the now moment of what's going on right now, not in some expectation. You're just, you feel peace, and you're able to see what's in front of you. And because you're not thinking about what's out beyond where your vision can see, out in the fog. You can see everything around you that is occurring and be able to make a move and flow that way, if that makes sense.
I feel it's like a feeling of there's nowhere in the world I'd rather be than right here in this moment, right now.
Right. And not because we just won the lottery, not because we just got the new dress that we were looking, or the new purse that we were looking for, or the new thing, or the new item, or the new circumstance, or the new person, you know, the new romance, or the new this, or the new that. No, what we're creating is not dependent on external circumstances. That is why it's called inner peace. And then maybe, and now we start to get into a little bit of the virtues. I feel lightness. Hey, I'm sorry. I'm not sorry. I feel my mind is just super light. It's not heavy. I'm not pulling myself down with these thoughts about. I'm so far removed from that. Like, it's just, I'm never going to go back to that. Like, I'm never going to go back to weighing myself down. My dog transitions to something new tomorrow. I am going to suffer. I'm going to feel, maybe, because depending on which animal transitions, I'll go way outside of my hydrostasy bubble for a few minutes. It might happen. I'm not a superhero here. I'm not Buddha. But I know that my practice will help me go back to that hydrostasy and that balance sooner, quicker, more efficient, more elegant. I'll adapt to the punch in the face a little bit better each time. Does that make sense? Maybe Gene is punching me and he still makes a little bit of contact, but you know, I move and I adapt, but he still made a little bit of contact. Next time, he might not make any contact because I'm learning from all of that as I go along. Does all that make sense? So T, if practiced, is a key to inner peace. So now there's that question, and I don't like this part of things, but Ernest, have you realized inner peace? The answer is yes. Like, I'm not Eckhart Tolle, I'm not saying that I've dissolved the ego, and I'm not saying that I've leveled up, and I'm not saying that I'm ready to trans-dimensionally portal to, you know, Alpha Centauri to whatever. But I feel peace. That's it. I feel inside a type of balance that grows. And from that, a type of, the best way that I can describe it is imagining the light of my attention and everything it shines on unfurls. It opens up. It welcomes me in. That's all being felt, folks. And every now and then I'll have a thought like, fuck, this is nice. Like, this is it, you know? Maybe Shayna and I decide to move to Chicago. That's going to be a sudden thing. It's going to be a lot of things moving around me, and I will feel peace. I'm not going to let any of that go outside of, maybe I lose my job. Maybe I'm not going to go outside of peace. Maybe a customer comes in and they're yelling. I'm not going to go outside of my peace. I don't do that anymore. That is hydrostasy. And
It's like living in what if land when you are thinking those thoughts, like, what if this happens? But what if this happens? And it like stops you from doing anything, making any change, because you're stuck in what if land in your mind and not like focusing on the step in front of you.
right. So let's say you're walking along and you're about to walk on a frozen lake, and then you just feel in your stomach that you should exercise caution. What if I fall in? Well, that's why I'm going to be cautious. And then you move forward deliberately, gently, and cautiously as you walk across that ice. If you start to, and so the thought, what if I fall in? That's not the end. That's not evil. That's just a thought. You just you didn't need it necessarily, but it's just a thought. But if we start to focus on that thought, if we start to indulge that thought, we won't cross the lake. We'll get paralyzed in fear, right, Shayna?
Yeah, that's why it's like you just stop moving. You're just paralyzed in your thought about falling in, and you just stop moving. Your fear just stops you from doing things. And I feel like sometimes that happens in non-situations where you're gonna fall in a lake that aren't even that serious. So stop moving because the fear just stops you of what if this happens type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's a lot like what I hear from my peers. Many of us have appointments for COVID shots, you know, and because of lack of supply, things change all the time. Appointments get canceled. They just get canceled. So you're all set to go to drive 30 miles to wherever they do it. And you get there and they don't have any. It's gone. So many of my peers daily worry about the fact that perhaps there won't be any. And then what'll I do?
Mm-hmm.
There is absolutely no control issue. It's not a control issue. There is nothing you can do about that. If it appears, you take it. If it doesn't, then something else will have to happen.
Mm-hmm.
But worrying that there won't be enough supply brings one down. I could see it. The behaviors change, the things they do, the choices they make change because they're concerned that we may run out of supply. Well, we may not. Who knows? We really don't know. I mean, it looks like there will be enough supply, but there may not be. There's a chance that there won't be. Whatever it is, there's still the next step, right? So when there isn't, and so now what do you do next? You know, what's the next step?
Mm-hmm.
I see too many people bound down by the worry, by that
Mm-hmm.
worry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I completely understand. So Now the seer's training is specific. It redirects two types of thoughts. Which ones?
Self and other.
Yes. So we start to redirect any thoughts about self and other. I don't need to sit here and think about myself all the fucking time. Seriously. Watch how many of your thoughts just leads back to you. Poor you, or indulging you, or you deserve, or you. So that there's enough of that. So in seer's training, we also start to create points of attention around, I probably need to start way over here. Imagination. And I mean superimposed imagination, not imaginary scenarios. These are background tricks of attention, by the way. Oh, I should put that. So these become background points of attention. Imagination, so that's one. And so as a background of attention, we have imagination, peace. That's a big one. Maybe I should have put peace first, but we'll use imagination as a trick of attention. We'll use peace itself as a trick of attention. And so we use smooth breath as a background of attention. Proprioception as a point of attention. And so these are some of the background attentions that we begin to add in seer's training. So the seer's training is starting to focus on imagination, the feeling of peace, embodying the smooth breath, embodying the feeling of your physicality in space and time, whole body awareness, essentially. And so that's some of the seer's training. We start to focus on those things. Does that make sense? I would say also, one other thing that it's kind of focusing on is the emotional derivative. From peace. So there will be emotional derivative of the practice. So because I'm present, because I'm mindful, because I'm engaging the moment happening now, because I'm doing all of these things, I get this emotional derivative, happiness. That's okay. Sometimes excitement, enjoyment, entertainment. The entertainment feeling from the practice itself. Does that make sense? And that's the T practice. Post-hydrostasy. Hydrostasy is now taking everything that we've been doing and it is literally just maintaining it. All right, Gene, see you later, man. Yes, Jerry, go ahead.
And then from my notes, I was just going to add, you have the seer's perspective, feeling without resistance, essence is alive, and number 3 is synchronicity.
What was that again, Jerry? What did we call those? I'm going to write those up here.
I just went back to my notes and you had the seer's perspective, 1, feeling without resistance, 2, essence is alive, 3, synchronicity.
Okay. Is 1 what?
Number 1, feeling without resistance.
I can dig it. That's all the emotional feedback and everything too. Yeah.
And then number 2, the all-important essence is alive.
That's also, so essence is also sensing essence.
Okay.
It sounds like I've actually just reworded these ones down here. Deliberate modulation, sensing energy, and the act of allowing. Because synchronicity is the act of allowing. It's just the synchronicity is where things are arriving simultaneously. But I do get it. I am going to actually strike that one from the record and just refer back to those other three. The seer's perspective is going to be very similar to these virtues right here of seeing. Deliberate modulation, sensing energy, and the act of allowing. The act of allowing will result in what we've come to call synchronicities. Essentially, energy arriving at the same time.
I like that word though.
I like it too, but yeah, that's more of a result of the act of allowing. You arrive where other things arrive, and you just allowed it to occur. And by allow, it's not trying to control. And by not trying to control, it's third pillar, second ring. All right, did my sound go out or what? I don't know. Can you hear me? Can you hear me now?
Yeah,
Okay.
we can hear you.
Yeah,
I got a
clear.
message and it said that my sound went out. All right, so that's the tea practice in a nutshell. Any questions, comments, or concerns about that? And then I will just briefly describe what is hydrostasy. I will put up here too. Let's see, I'm going to delete this circle around it. And I'm going to make another box because more supplemental training would be the rings of power. And I don't know, I haven't thought of a word for like the push hands, but the rings of power would be basically just complementary, something that we would do on the side. It coincides with a lot of the practice, but this is the tea practice in a nutshell. And I'm going to put up here as well the essential, reason we're doing this. The path to inner peace and the virtues of peace. Which is things like synchronicity, flow, relaxment, all that good stuff. Better health, better understanding of your own body and what you should be doing with it. All right, so I'm going to save this, and then I'm going to erase it all. Oops, that's the chat box.
Don't erase it.
Hey man, I saved it. I'll share it in the group.
Just kidding.
And so now this is my description of where I'm at. So if somebody's like, well, what about you? All right. So I'm going to create a timeline. It's going to look like this. And I'm going to create the circle of peace. And that's right here in the middle. And then I'm going to create a bigger circle around it. And that is my hydrostasy bubble, my peace bubble. I can still feel peace when I'm inside of this bigger bubble. And we have a point outside of it. Well, I guess I'll use a box. For the point outside of it, that's an extreme. We have E1 and E2. They're equal and opposite extremes. Have you seen this commercial that's talking about obsessions? Obsessions, good. Yeah, no, obsession equal imbalance and psychological suffering and physical suffering. And it just looks good because it's fancy sometimes. But this is E1, it's extreme 1. And this is E2. E2. And this is bubble. The hydrostasy bubble is maintained by maintaining at least 2 background tricks of attention. And they're complementary, by the way. So they're complementary points of attention. So complementary point of attention 1 and CPA 2. I guess that's what I'll call them. So complementary points of attention are the ones that I showed on my note card. The different points of attention that I'm doing right now. So proprioception is basically filling your hydrostasy bubble by paying attention to inside and outside simultaneously, P1 and P2. We started doing all of this from the very beginning, but now it's maintaining it, cultivating it, and issuing personal power. Does all this make sense? So essentially, inside of this hydrostasy circle, I'm going to put the hydrostasy effect, which is what this overall is. I could call it the hydrostatic effect as well, but hydrostasy effect. And this circle is called the hydrostasy bubble. Peace. It's the feeling of peace. It's a bubble of peace that I've created around myself. And I can always feel where I'm at inside of this bubble, and even when I'm outside of the bubble. The further outside of it, though, the less aware of this entire dynamic. And so that's the hydrostatic practice. The hydrostatic practice is maintaining points of attention to maintain inner peace. So if you want to look at it this way, T is a practice of inner peace. How to get there, how to find inner peace, how to realize inner peace, and how to maintain inner peace. And exist from the point of peace. And that's all I got. That's what I'm here to offer the world. And there it is. Any questions, comments, or concerns before we wrap this up?
Thank you for all you're doing.
Hey, you're welcome.
I mean that.
Well, I mean, there are virtues. So I'm just a little bit careful about virtue talking because I don't want to virtue sell. My results, I don't know. More people need to do this practice before I can compare results or talk about results at all. But in general, I mean, I'm super relaxed. Like my mind is relaxed. Oh, I forgot humor. Humor is one of the points in seer's training. So yeah, I think in general I do have a pretty decent sense of humor. I think I'm pretty sure I do. People giggle sometimes.
It's getting better.
Yeah. I don't know. I think it's always been pretty darn good.
I mean, you make me laugh a lot, so.
I do.
I mean,
Yep.
but I'm biased, so that's not fair.
Yeah. No, it's fair. I make Jenny laugh too, so yeah. I got a decent sense of humor, and that's a part of the seer's training is finding the humor, because that's a thing. And Jenny and I talked about this a little bit. We don't see our animals laughing very often. So I view that as kind of an example of human evolution, and we can kind of embrace that and cultivate that and let that flourish, just like superimposed imagination. I have no reason to believe that my dog is imagining dragons. I just don't. But I can. And so I'm gonna, in a manner speaking. It's the stuff that we came into the world doing, but then the carved block tried to carve it out of us. Stop being so humorous, and stop being so this, and stop being so that. Okay, any questions, comments, or concerns before we head out of here? When I deliver hydrostasy, I just deliver the points of attention. And then if you do it, then you can very likely have similar results. And the result, peace, and everything that comes from peace, which is a whole lot of creativity too, by the way. So what will come from your hydrostasy circle and peace will be completely different than mine. And then sometimes, if I want to show this as a moving thing, sometimes I'll show this as a circling effect, because this is all the stuff that we have to adapt to in the island of the practical. And so that's okay too. So we can look at it this way as well. Any questions?
So what does the extreme 1 and extreme 2 represent? Like outside your bubble? Is that suffering, extremes?
Well,
But
it might
oh,
not
go ahead.
always it might not always initially be perceived as suffering, because you could get a winning lottery ticket and you just went to an extreme. But you could also get news that your best friend transitioned, and then that would be a different extreme. But both are extremes. So let's say, Karen, we watched that commercial and it's talking about obsession, and like how obsessions, some are good obsessions, but obsessing about your ex, that's a bad obsession. No, it's they're both an extreme. So that's why I put it on two opposite sides, because sometimes the world wants to look at certain extremes as good, certain habits as good, and so no, I'm just blowing that shit out of the water. It's just any extreme is going to be unbeneficial. Does that make sense? If we exist there too long.
Yes. So yes, it does make sense. So hydrostasy is you maintain a peace bubble and the extreme, but you're not at the extremes mostly ever.
Mostly ever. And if I do,
right, but not never. Yeah.
Maybe not never. I'm not going to put myself in a box, and
right.
I'm not
right.
put myself on a pedestal. So if my son transitioned to something new, like I'm out of my hydrostasy bubble. Like that motherfucker's gone for a while, I'm assuming. I don't know how long. I would like to think that, I'll be able to recreate that and reestablish that bubble quickly, reasonably quickly. But yeah, I mean, that's going to be an example. Something happened to Shayna, something happened to, Kobe, or, somebody close to me, any of you guys. I'm going to go outside of my hydrostasy bubble in grief, very likely, for a moment. But hey, that's my spider's web. So I don't judge yours. You don't have to judge mine. Does that make sense, Karen? So I may get out of that hydrostasy bubble, but in general, I'm almost never outside of it.
Yes, it makes sense. And then the balance, you always say you balance with points of attention. That's an inner point and an outer point. That's how you balance. I'm just making sure I get it all.
You're right. Contrasting points of attention. So right now I maintain inner and outer, and I'll do different things with my attention that complement one another, so that it is like light, shadow, horizon, ground. So it's these two complementing what would look like yin yang. It would look like opposites, and I'm embracing them both, and it creates something new, something balanced. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yep. It makes sense. Thanks.
And hydrostasy is also still a little bit of seer's training, because the practices build on each other. So I'm still also paying attention to my relaxed mind. My mind is relaxed. I can actually pay attention to that feeling of relaxedness, the feeling of lightness, and dare I use the term enlightenment, but my mind feels very light. I'll just say that. All right. Mike, any questions? Jerry, any questions? Okay, so we'll look at deliberate pace now. Your homework is to continue to pay attention to your feet and your pace. Mike, you're going to have to walk somewhere today, very likely. I don't care if it's to the refrigerator or to the bathroom Lauren, you got somewhere to walk. So, it's a little bit later in the afternoon for you than it is for us, but you're going to be doing some walking. Ida probably doing some walking. So now we're kind of getting into fox walking in 4 modes and kind of blending it all together a little bit. But let's pay attention to our pace. That's a part of fox walking. So as you're walking today, is your pace deliberate? Can you remember to check in and pay attention to the pace that you're walking? Anytime you're walking, whether you're doing a formal fox walking and maybe that's walking on the beach for 30 minutes, or you're getting up and you're going to get a snack. Did you walk to that snack deliberately and on purpose, paying attention to your feet and paying attention to your pace? Okay? That's fox walking. And that's all the way back to basic alignment. Okay, and then tomorrow in the podcast, I'll ask you how you did. Sound good?
Sounds good.
All right, I will see you guys tomorrow for the podcast at 6:15 on my drive to work. And also some weather, but the forecast looks clear. So I should see you guys tomorrow, or hear you
Thank
tomorrow.
you. Thank you. Bye,
All
everybody.
right.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
Thank you.
You're
Bye,
welcome.
everyone.
Bye.
Bye, everyone. Have a good rest of your
Bye.
day.
Bye.
I'll hopefully upload some stuff, but we'll see.